My mother-in-law smiled at me across the dinner table and said, "It's sweet that you work so hard at your little government desk job, honey. Someone has to file the paperwork while the real heroes are out there doing the actual work." The whole table laughed. My husband laughed too, though he tried to turn it into a cough when he caught my eye. I picked up my fork and cut into the pot roast his mother had spent all afternoon cooking, and I said nothing. I had learned a long time ago that saying nothing was sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do. My name is Vivian Cole. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, the only daughter of a high school history teacher and a woman who ran a small alteration shop out of our garage. We were not a wealthy family. We were not a connected family, but we were a family that believes down to our bones that the work you did mattered more than whether anyone was watching you do it. I joined the Army at 22, fresh out of NC State with a degree in computer science and a very specific invitation from a recruiter who had been watching my thesis project for 2 semesters. I didn't join because I was patriotic in the flag-waving sense, though I do love this country. I joined because someone handed me a problem that no one in the world had fully solved yet and told me they needed me to solve it. That was the thing about my job. The problem was always real. The stakes were always real. The work was never decorative. But from the outside, I know what it looked like. I worked in a building. I wore civilian clothes most of the time. I drove a 9-year-old Honda Accord with a cracked passenger side mirror that I kept meaning to fix. I didn't talk about what I did because I was not permitted to talk about what I did. So when my husband Elliot first brought me home to meet his family, what they saw was a quiet woman in her late 20s who worked for the government in some vague capacity and seemed to have no interesting stories. Elliot's family was from money, not generational wealth exactly, but the kind of comfortable upper-middle-class prosperity that accumulates over 3 decades of a father who ran a regional insurance company and a mother who chaired every volunteer committee in their suburb of Cincinnati. His older brother had been a Marine. His cousin had done 2 tours in Afghanistan. His uncle had a Purple Heart framed above the mantel in the den. The Halverson family had a very specific idea of what it meant to serve. And I, with my government desk job and my cracked mirror and my inability to discuss anything I actually did all day, did not fit that idea. I first noticed it at Thanksgiving, the year Elliot and I got engaged. His cousin Ray, the one who had done the 2 tours, asked me what I did at work. I said I worked in cybersecurity for the Department of Defense. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are deciding how to be polite about something. "So more of an IT thing," he said. "Something like that," I said. His mother, sitting nearby, overheard and said, "Elliot always did go for the brainy ones." She said it warmly. She meant it as a compliment, but it carried underneath it the clear implication that brainy was a consolation prize, that real service looked like Ray's service, that what I did was, as my mother-in-law would put it 14 months later over pot roast, paperwork. I did not correct her. I had signed agreements that prevented me from correcting her. The engagement dinner was worse. Elliot's father, a large genial man named Harold who called everyone buddy regardless of gender, gave a toast in which he said he was proud his son was marrying a smart, hard-working woman who would be a wonderful partner and a great mom someday. Then he turned to Ray and gave a second, entirely unrehearsed toast about Ray's service record that lasted 4 times as long and ended with the whole table on their feet. I clapped along with everyone else. Elliot leaned over and whispered, "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be. He loves his nephew. He loves you too." "I know he does," I said, and I did know it. Harold was not a cruel man. None of them were cruel people. They just didn't know what I did, and they had filled that ignorance with their best guess, and their best guess was not much. What I actually did, in the most general terms I am able to share even now, was protect the systems that kept certain critical infrastructure running: power grids, water treatment facilities, financial clearinghouses, the unsexy machinery of a functioning country. I worked on a specialized team within a unit that most people in the federal government had never heard of, under a division director who reported to people who reported to people whose names appeared in exactly the kinds of briefings that made room for quiet. I had been doing this for 7 years by the time Elliot and I got married. In those 7 years, my team had identified and neutralized 11 significant intrusion attempts. 2 of them, had they succeeded, would have affected the daily lives of millions of Americans in ways they never would have fully understood. The lights would have gone out, the water would have stopped, the ATMs would have gone dark. I could not tell Elliot's family any of this. So when his mother made her paperwork comment, I smiled and asked if she'd like more water, and I let it go. The wedding was in June, at a vineyard outside Dayton that his mother had found on Pinterest. It was beautiful. I wore a dress that cost more than I had ever spent on a single item of clothing. Elliot cried when I walked down the aisle, which made me cry, which made my own mother cry from the 3rd row, while my father patted her shoulder and looked slightly panicked. At the reception, Ray gave a speech. It was a good speech, actually. He talked about Elliot being his favorite cousin, about growing up together, about the time they were 12 and got lost hiking for 6 hours, and Elliot had kept both of them calm. He made everyone laugh. He made everyone laugh. He made everyone laugh. Then he said, toward the end, looking right at me with genuine warmth, "And Vivian, I don't know exactly what you do all day, but I know Elliot says you're brilliant, and I know this family is lucky to have you. Welcome to the circus." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But I heard what was underneath it. The "I don't know exactly what you do," the way the sentence slid past my actual work and landed on Elliot's endorsement of my intelligence as the evidence, as if my work wasn't worth knowing about, as if I were being welcomed in spite of my profession rather than because of anything I had done. I was a woman who had spent 7 years defending infrastructure that millions of people depended on, and not one person in that vineyard knew it, and that was entirely by design, and I had made peace with it. Until I hadn't. The dinner that changed everything happened on a Saturday in October, about 14 months into our marriage. It was Harold's 65th birthday. We drove up to Cincinnati on Friday evening and spent the night in Elliot's childhood bedroom, surrounded by his old track trophies and a faded poster of LeBron James. The party was the next afternoon, about 30 people, catered by a local barbecue place Harold loved, held in the backyard under a rented canopy because the forecast showed a 40% chance of rain. Ray was there, freshly back from a contracting job somewhere he couldn't talk about, which everyone treated as confirmation of his continued coolness. His girlfriend was there, a woman named Becca who competed in triathlons and had the easy confidence of someone who had never once doubted her own value. Elliot's older brother was there with his wife and their 3 kids, who immediately occupied all available yard space. I arrived carrying a cake I had driven 40 minutes to pick up from the specific bakery Harold had mentioned in passing 3 months earlier, because I pay attention to things like that. Nobody noticed the cake was from that bakery. That was fine. For the first hour, things were pleasant. I helped set up. I talked to Elliot's sister-in-law about her kids' soccer leagues. I had a beer with Harold and wished him a genuinely happy birthday and meant it. Then Ray's girlfriend Becca, who I'd met twice before and who I liked well enough, asked me what I'd been working on lately. I said the same thing I always said, same stuff. Government cybersecurity, nothing very exciting to talk about. She nodded. Fair enough. But Ray was nearby and he heard it, and something about being around his family and his girlfriend and his contracting bravado made him generous in the worst way. He said, "Come on, Viv, give her something. You do anything fun this year, or is it all just monitoring dashboards?" I looked at him. "Monitoring dashboards," I said. He laughed. Becca laughed. Elliot, from 6 feet away, quietly stared at his beer. "I keep telling Elliot he married someone mysterious," Becca said, and she meant it pleasantly, truly. But it landed on top of everything else, and the pile was getting heavy. My mother-in-law arrived beside us then, Perfect timing, carrying a tray of deviled eggs. Oh, we gave up asking Vivian about work years ago, she said brightly. She's very hush-hush. She made a little zipper motion across her lips and set down the deviled eggs and moved on. I took a deviled egg. The afternoon wore on. Harold opened presents. Someone put on a playlist of classic rock. The rain held off. I was standing near the fence at the edge of the yard, watching the clouds move, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen. It was my division director. He almost never called on weekends. He had called me on a weekend exactly twice in 7 years. I excused myself quietly and walked toward the side of the house. "Cole," he said, before I'd finished saying hello. "Where are you?" "Cincinnati." "My father-in-law's birthday. How fast can you get to an exfil point?" My stomach went still in that specific way it does when the situation has escalated past what you were briefed on. What happened? He gave me 12 seconds of information. I processed it in 6. A coordinated intrusion attempt on a regional grid cluster, 3 states, moving faster than the automated countermeasures could track. My counterpart on the overnight rotation had hit a code wall that required specific authorization protocols only 2 people on the team could execute. The other person was on a plane with no connectivity somewhere over the Pacific. I was the other person. "I need 30 minutes to get to a secure terminal," I said. "You got 20. There's a DOD liaison already moving toward your location. They'll have a vehicle," I said. "Understood," and ended the call. I walked back to the party. Elliot saw my face and knew immediately that something had happened because he has always been able to read me even when I could not tell him what he was reading. He started moving toward me. I held up one hand, the small signal we had developed over years. "I'm okay, but I need a minute, and I cannot explain right now." He stopped. I went to find Harold. He was at the grill, supervising the last of the ribs even though the catering team was right there. I put my hand on his arm and said, "Harold, I am so sorry. I have to go." He turned. "Everything okay?" "It will be. I'm sorry. Happy birthday." I hugged him, which I didn't do often enough, and I meant it, which I think he felt. I turned to get my bag from inside the house. I nearly walked directly into my mother-in-law, who was standing in the kitchen doorway. "You're leaving," she said, and her voice had that very specific register that mothers-in-law use when they believe their son's wife is about to do something inconsiderate. "I have to," I said. "It's Harold's birthday." "I know. I'm sorry." She studied me. I could see her deciding that this was exactly the kind of antisocial behavior she had always quietly suspected from me, the woman who wouldn't talk about her job, who showed up and helped, and then disappeared without explanation. "Vivian," she said, and her voice softened just barely, "is everything all right with you and Elliot?" It took me a moment to realize what she was suggesting, that maybe I was inventing an excuse, that maybe the vagueness of my work had always been a convenient shield for a woman who just didn't really want to be there. "Everything is fine with me and Elliot," I said. "This is a work emergency. I'll explain when I can." "Your desk job," she said, not cruelly, just with the particular exhaustion of someone who has stopped believing the story. I didn't answer. I picked up my bag. I was halfway down the driveway when I heard the sound. Elliot heard it too. I would learn this later, and so did Ray and Harold, and everyone under that rented canopy. A heavy, rhythmic chop of rotor blades, coming from the north, dropping in altitude. The Black Hawk landed on the street in front of the house. Not a lawn, the actual street. A 2-person DOD liaison team was out of the vehicle before the skids fully settled, moving toward the driveway with the specific purposeful calm of people who have done this before and have no time for reaction. One of them caught my eye and said, "Dr. Cole," I said. "That's me." He handed me a clearance badge and a satellite tablet already running a secure session. "We've got a mobile terminal van 2 blocks over. We can have you operational in 4 minutes. "Let's go," I said. I turned back once. I don't know why. Maybe because I am, underneath everything, still the daughter of a history teacher from Raleigh who taught me that moments matter even when you're in a hurry. The entire party was standing at the edge of the yard. 30 people. Harold with his spatula still in his hand. Ray with his mouth open. His girlfriend Becca frozen with a deviled egg halfway to her lips. Elliot's mother with both hands pressed flat to her cheeks, the way people look when reality has just reorganized itself around them without asking permission. My mother-in-law was staring at me, specifically at me, not at the helicopter, at me. Elliot was standing at the fence. I looked at him and he looked at me, and his face held something I had not seen there before. Not surprise, because Elliot had always known I was capable of more than I could say, but awe. The private awe of someone who has always believed in something and just watched the rest of the world catch up. I gave him a small nod. He gave me one back. Then I turned and walked to the liaison vehicle and got in and did not look back again, because I had a job to do and the grid was not going to fix itself. I was operational in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The intrusion attempt was sophisticated, the kind of thing that takes a team of very patient, very smart people months to build, and a very specific set of protocols to dismantle. I worked for 4 hours straight on a folding table in the back of a signals van parked in a Cincinnati neighborhood, while, presumably, someone explained to the catering team why there was a military helicopter blocking the street. By 11 that night, the grid was secure. 3 states' worth of infrastructure that would have cascaded into rolling blackouts, contaminated water advisories, frozen financial systems. None of that happened because my team did its job and because I was in the country instead of over the Pacific. Elliot picked me up from the van at 11:40. He didn't say anything for the first few minutes. He just drove. Then he said, "My mum called me 4 times. I figured. She wanted me to explain what happened." "What did you tell her?" "That I married someone who's really good at her job." He glanced at me sideways. She didn't have a follow-up question, which is a first. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in about 8 hours, and it felt like releasing something I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Is she angry?" I asked. Elliot was quiet for a moment. "I think she's more recalibrating." My dad called too. He wanted to know if the helicopter was because of something serious. I can't give him specifics. I told him that. He said, Elliot stopped. He said, "Tell her thank you." I looked out the window at the highway lights. Harold had spent 40 minutes of his 65th birthday dinner talking about Ray's service record. He had given Ray a 4-minute toast and given me 3 sentences about being a good future mother. And now Harold, with his spatula and his barbecue ribs and his genuine good heart, had said thank you. I wasn't angry at him. I never had been, really. He had just believed what the evidence in front of him suggested, and the evidence in front of him had been carefully limited by my job requirements and my own reticence. He had done the best he could with what he could see. We stayed through Sunday. I thought about leaving early, avoiding the conversation, letting everything settle into a new shape without direct acknowledgement, but I had spent 7 years saying nothing, and I had made peace with it, and the peace had been worth it, and also it had cost something. Sunday brunch was quieter than usual. Harold kept looking at me the way you look at someone when you're composing sentences and discarding them. Ray was more careful with his words than I had ever seen him. His girlfriend had apparently spent the night researching DOD cybersecurity divisions on her phone because she asked me 2 careful, respectful questions about infrastructure security that told me she now understood something about the shape of what I did. I answered them honestly at the level of generality I was permitted. My mother-in-law was the last to speak. We were washing dishes side by side after brunch. The rest of the family dispersed to various corners of the house, and she handed me a plate to dry and said, without preamble, "I want to apologize." I dried the plate. "I think I made you feel small," she said. "I didn't mean to, but I think I did it anyway, and I've been doing it for a while, and I'm sorry." She didn't say it dramatically, she didn't cry. She said it the way someone says something when they have decided to be honest and are not going to dress it up into something easier. I set the plate down. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. What you do, she paused. I still don't understand it. I probably never will. But I understand it matters. I understand last night could have gone very differently for a lot of people, and it didn't because of you. Because of my team, I said. She nodded. Because of your team. We went back to the dishes. The rain that had held off all day yesterday finally came down against the kitchen window. Slow and steady, the way October rain in Ohio does. Elliot appeared in the doorway, looked at the two of us standing at the sink, and the expression on his face was something I have thought about since. He looked like a man watching two separate understandings of a person finally collapse into one. He looked relieved in a way that I don't think even he had known he was waiting to feel. I don't tell this story because I want credit. I didn't get a helicopter because I earned recognition. I got a helicopter because my country needed something done, and I was the person who could do it. But I tell it because there is a particular exhaustion that comes from being invisible in the places where you most want to be known, not famous, not celebrated, just known, seen, not assumed. And for 7 years I had accepted that invisibility as the cost of the work, and mostly that was right, and mostly I would make the same choice again. I just want you to understand that the cost was real, that every dinner, every toast, every zipped lip and smiled over comment, that was real, that the woman who sat quietly at that backyard party and said monitoring dashboards and let it land however it landed, she was not indifferent, she was patient, and there is a difference. Elliot asked me once, a few weeks after, if I wished it had happened differently, if I wished I had ever told them more, pushed back, defended myself. I thought about it for a while. No, I said finally. The work was worth being quiet for. It always was. He nodded. He understood. But the apology was worth something too, I said. He took my hand. Outside our window the city was running, lights on, water moving through pipes, money changing hands between strangers in the ordinary miraculous way that it does every second of every day, sustained by systems that most people will never see and a few quiet people will never stop protecting. I was one of them. I always would be. That was enough.